Thanks a lot, Dan, for being with us. Maybe to start with, can you say a few words about who you are and a few words about Socotra for those in the room who are not already familiar with the company?
Yeah. Well, I'm Dan Woods, CEO, founder of Socotra, as it probably says up there. And so Socotra is the first and really only, I dare say, policy admin that's truly modern, built like modern software that's true off-the-shelf, cloud, APIs, all those sorts of stuff that enabled, well, some of the things, use cases that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so I'm on my side, Florian. I'm the co-founder of AStoryaVC. We are the most active Insurtech investor in Europe, and I will be very happy to have this discussion with you. So you briefly mentioned the use case. So to start with, can you share a bit of background about that project with Socotra and AXA?
Yes, and again, I'm very sorry for Emmeline that she wasn't able to make it here, but and hope she's doing well with her family. But the use case was that so AXA entered into a deal with, unfortunately I can't name it, but let's just say it's a top rideshare company that was probably known by most of the people in this room, and they wanted to provide income protection for their drivers for vehicle non-operability. So if you work for a parcel delivery service and your vehicle breaks down and you can't work, you still get paid. This is not true for these drivers. And this is people in the room from the UK may remember a few years ago, this was actually news, like how do you deal with this problem of gig workers versus employees and things like that, what benefits should be offered. And while that conflict was going on, insurance was stepping up with an organic solution. So what they desired was for the driver to be able to purchase insurance through the app with a few touches that would then bill by mile and pay out according to typical driving habits when there's a claim, which could also be filed through the app. So that was the problem that AXA had to solve.
That's interesting. You kind of described, without naming it, a kind of
you notice
use
how
case
slowly I'm speaking when I say it.
No, but that's very interesting because that's a real use case of embedded insurance. So we know that's a very hot trend, at least heavily discussed in the Insurtech scene. But here again, that's a real use case. So. But the reality is that there are maybe as many definitions of embedded insurance as people in the room. So what would be your definition of embedded insurance? And why do you think this trend is hot right now?
Yeah, well, the definition, I think, is relatively simple. It's insurance going from B2C to B2B2C. But why now, I think, is a really interesting question. B2C, of course, is a more natural data model. Business model, I mean, sorry. You can tell I'm an old nerd. That data model. It's a Freudian slip. It's a more natural business model. And I think part of the reason that was a natural place to start is I think back to the fintech boom a decade earlier in banking. And there's apps all over the place. All my banks have apps. And I can use them to check balance, check my stock portfolio, deposit checks, do all these sorts of things. Enormous convenience. And I think that the start place of the Insurtech revolution came out of a lot of people who did very well in banking, venture capitalists and entrepreneurs going, well, insurance isn't that different. Let's just try what worked over here. Apps are popular here. Let's try apps over there. Why not? And turns out behavior is a little different. Whereas I want to know my bank balance, I want to know how my portfolio is doing. When I hear the market had a bad day, I want to know what it means for my retirement savings. I want to deposit a check. I want to do all these sorts of things. I want that experience. I have an app for my insurer. Unless I have a claim, I really don't look at it. And I think that there was an education of what that would look like. Also, there's an infrastructural component. So to do B2B2C, there's twos in it. There's two connections. Yeah. And the B2B connector requires a different kind of infrastructure.
Nice definition. So I think that everyone has a clear view. So that was, let's say, a kind of a step down from the product itself. So let's come back to the use case that you have with AXA. Basically, what was the major challenge that you had to tackle with Socotra?
Yeah. Well, one challenge, of course, is we're dealing with a unique product that I don't know if this product has even existed before. Income protection for a gig worker for their equipment not working, for example. So it's not like, now we're uniquely positioned for this because the way our product is built doesn't have a single line of code that's specific to any one insurance product. We can talk more about that. But for a traditional insurer, or insurer with traditional IT solutions, this would be a difficulty because they can't just grab something that's been used before. But secondly, and probably more importantly, was the speed. Because when you're talking about one of these rideshare companies, they're very technologically advanced. They move very quickly. They expect their partner to move quickly. They expect the infrastructure to be strong. They expect the APIs to make sense, things like that. And that's something that, well, certainly none of the legacy solutions we're going to do. We're going to supply the kind of APIs and reliability and speed that was necessary. And on the other hand, they certainly didn't have time to build something themselves, assuming that they were capable of it and had the staffing for it.
Thanks a lot. And maybe before jumping on the next question, don't forget that you can raise your own question in the audience going to the website, and I will have a look at the iPad and take a few of these questions. So back to what you mentioned on the API, how do you believe, because you mentioned that API twice and the infrastructure, the speed of delivery, this has long been a very hot and discussed topic once again, but what do you believe is the impact of this technology, especially applied to embedded insurance, and why this technology is so important?
Yeah, well, for embedded to work, I think there's really two things that you need. You need API and you need cloud. And if you might actually want to talk a little bit more about cloud, because I think there's a lot of, I mean, I'll come back to APIs, but they're equally important.
Yeah.
I think that the reason, I think the term cloud is horribly misused. I think people say cloud, and what they mean is when I walk into my company, we walk into the basement, I see no servers because they're somewhere else. Cloud is not about a rent versus buy decision on your servers. In fact, I'll say something contrarian. I think you could build cloud in your building if you wanted to. And let me explain what I mean by that. Cloud, you go back to what cloud means. It's because when you build an architectural diagram, you build a cloud. Why is it a cloud? That doesn't mean it's because that's outside the building. What it means is that its complexity is invisible to you. And what kind of complexity are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the kind of complexity that means that it doesn't go down for upgrades. It just keeps running through upgrades. It means that it keeps running through hardware failures. Even if a data center goes down, it'll reroute to another data center, things like that. It means that it doesn't go down due to high loads. If the load increases, it can spin up additional services and things like that. That's more true to the meaning of cloud than it just being in a different building. Because when we're talking about embedded, if we're talking about certainly for ride sharing, but many other places that have embedded, if you're embedding within service, I mean, you're embedding usually with you might be a website or something like that that tends to expect a high uptime, high reliability, high loads, things like that. That's where you need modern cloud infrastructure. And that's where I'll be contrarian and say, I think you could have cloud literally in your own building if you actually implemented all of those things. That would be much more cloud than what's the trend right now is to take your old on-prem legacy installed in Google, Microsoft, or AWS and call it cloud when it's just the exact same legacy running in a rented server. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, as you mentioned, is the APIs. And this requires a different kind of thinking. So I attend a lot of these conferences, like everyone here, and you hear a lot about being customer-centric. Absolutely important. Of course, it's very important to be customer-centric. But the question is, who is your customer? Because as soon as you shift into embedded, your customer is not the consumer anymore. Your affinity partner, that person's worried about the customer. Your customer is me. When I say me, I don't mean Dan, the CEO of Socotra. I mean Dan, 30-year-old Dan, who is a software engineer for 10 years. And your customer is that engineer who is trying to integrate with that API. And insurers are figuring out what does it mean to be customer-centric when your customer is an engineer, as it pertains to embedded. We're talking, of course, about embedded here. And if you want to know what it looks like, all you need to do is just go to your favorite search engine, type the name of any grown-up software company, Microsoft, Oracle, Google, and type APIs. Type Microsoft APIs, Google APIs, and watch what happens. It'll take you to the website for the APIs for the documentation, and it's actually well designed. It's beautiful, and to an engineer, it's beautiful. To the rest of non-engineers, trust me, it's beautiful when you look at those things. But that's a user experience for the engineer to have that. And of course, go to type Socotra APIs, or just go to docs.socotra.com, because that's where we think about it. But anyway, that's a kind of thinking that is taking some time, and that's the kind of thing that's required. Because embedded is not going away. Embedded is going to grow. The projections that I read recently, in 5 years, just in Europe, it's looking to be 60 billion euro a year. In 10 years, 200 billion. Globally, 1.5 trillion. And then at which time it'll be 30% of P&C. So this trend's not going away, and also this trend isn't unique to insurance. This is part of a larger trend. If you ever use the travel site to book an airline ticket, that's embedded. If you've used a map to find a restaurant, and then over on the side, it says, would you like to book would you like to make a reservation through, well, in the US it's OpenTable. Now, how much, if that's popular here, that's kind of funny because you're talking to a map, talking to OpenTable, talking possibly a reservation system for a restaurant. So that's like B2B to B2C. And then another example is Google Ads, which I can talk some more about, but I think I've gone long on this one. But I think there's some profound things we can learn from the way Google Ads embedded.
Yeah, and that's quite interesting because you just named probably the two hottest tech trends in the insurance space, cloud, API, which raises, I believe, something that was discussed in a panel yesterday, which is the famous a dilemma that we see among corporates, the make or buy dilemma. Mm-hmm. So basically, is there any tip or what insurance company should look at when they buy a software on the market? Do you have any tip or best practices to share? Yeah.
So first off, I mean, there's so much custom software out there. I've never blamed an insurer when they look at a vendor's software and go, this is custom software. If I'm going to buy custom either way, I might as well build it myself. And a lot of insurers have gone that route. The three things, well, why are these things important? I don't want to just say, oh, look for APIs, look for cloud. Well, why are these things important? The why, of course, matters. We don't want to just chase buzzwords. We're entering what I've been calling the rapid connection age of insurance IT, where we're moving away from monoliths, single vendor monoliths, towards, call them multi-service architectures, call it best of breed, whatever you want to call it. That's very much the future. Now, when I say I include best of breed in the list there, I don't know if a sign is twitching. Best of breed, when you hear that phrase, a lot of people have been around insurance IT for a while, get heartburn and high blood pressure. They think of vendors pointing fingers at each other when things don't work. They think of upgrade log jams when there's all kinds of dependencies and things like that. But to them, I like to say I've been using best of breed successfully since 1989 when I installed WordPerfect on MS-DOS 5. So what's different? And my favorite example that we're all familiar with is the smartphone, which is just a marvel of best of breed. And we all know what the world was like before best of breed phones. And look what happened. So what can we learn from that? And why didn't it work before? So what you need are components. The number one thing to look for in your software is this thing best of breed ready? Is this thing multi-service ready? Is it ready for the rapid connection age? And there's really three things that you need. It needs to be truly off-the-shelf, open API, and cloud. And what's nice about these three things is you don't need to be at all technical to know if you've got them. Cloud is when the vendor doesn't have to schedule the upgrades with you. Gmail has never scheduled an upgrade with me. I just keep using Gmail. Do you know what version of Gmail you're on? That's a nonsensical question. You're just using Gmail. And your Gmail is the same as mine, it's the same as everyone else's that uses Gmail. Off the shelf. Off the shelf is when you can get your license in under like 24 hours, hopefully in 10 minutes. Here you go. That's off the shelf. If the vendor tells you, well, it's going to take us 6 months to install it, configure it, whatever, then okay, that's not off the shelf. And third was open documentation. And that's when you can go right to the website and everything. When everything that a vendor's customers know about the product is known to the general public, that's open documentation. There's nothing, if you want to use Salesforce, a lot of people are using Salesforce. Is there anything you know about Salesforce that Salesforce's competitors don't know that they can find right on their website? No, they don't make you sign a massive NDA and then give you the secret stuff. It's all right there. It's a grown-up piece of software, and that's how it works. And the reason that's very, very important is because if you're relying on the customer telling you, here's how my software works, don't tell anyone. Well, what do you think they're telling this person about how the software works? They're portraying, their software is a different thing to different people. If they're not going to go on the record about it, like we all know is what a grown-up software company does, then what's going on there? And that you should be very, very wary of that. You want to have the reliability of your vendor going on the record of this is what I sell and this is the thing it does. Anyway, so you need those three things: off the shelf, true cloud, open APIs.
Yeah, that's very interesting because we have a lot of questions around that topic. So it seems that every time we discuss about technology in insurance, then comes the famous dilemma. So thanks a lot for sharing this thought. Maybe one almost last question for you. The company is based in the or headquartered in the US. So is there any lesson learned from scaling from the US to working with AXA, a huge European player?
So let's see. Well, we've been operating. We got our first customer in Europe in 2017. Okay. And we had 4 at the time, 2 years ago, that we built a full-time staff here. We're greatly increasing our European presence this year. We already have sales, customer support, solutions engineers, core engineers, and we'll be increasing all of those. I think that this is also where the maturity of the software. I'll come back to AXA. Something remarkable at AXA in our project there. AXA, my belief is that AXA is, through this project, is the first software company ever. We're the software company. Yeah. The first insurer ever to buy a policy administration system license, read the directions, and use it. Yeah. They're the first ones ever to do that because the APIs are right there. They have fantastic engineers. Some of the best we've worked with, very talented. We didn't have anyone on the ground at all. So that enabled us to move into Europe quite freely, remotely, because of being productized. But now, as we're expanding, the relationships are extremely important. Expanding, of course, within AXA or other customers here. I also want to give a shout out to, for embedded, Tony Digital is a customer of ours out of Zurich that's doing, among other things, they're doing motor and household completely embedded. We're powering that, so it can do multiple things. So those are, the challenges I think are obvious. People want to buy from people they understand, who understand the markets. They want to meet face to face, even in the remote world.
Yeah, and maybe few words on what should be the next big tech trend in insurance, according to you?
Yeah, I think we're just seeing the beginning of the rapid connection era, where you've got where the enterprise starts to look more like the smartphone. And this is, we're not the first ones to do this in enterprise. This is what Salesforce has done. This is what Stripe and Square have proper marketplaces, where you can just add an integration by saying, I want that one, answer a few questions graphically, bam, they're installed. And it's all in the cloud and working.
Yeah, so basically, speed is key. Thanks a lot, Dan, for sharing so many insights. Feel free to reach out to Dan, and please, a load of applause. Thanks a lot.
All right.